Hello, welcome everyone to the Universal Peace Federation. My name is Ray Lapalkin, and our program today is a continuation. It's part 2 of Critical Northeast Asian Issues. And once again, it's sponsored by IMAP. It's the International Media Association for Peace, which is one of the associations of the Universal Peace Federation. So IMAP is an association of media professionals working together for the achievement of a world of lasting and sustainable peace. The International Media Association for Peace recognizes the vital role that journalists play in guarding against totalitarianism and supporting the expansion of freedom. IMAP represents a worldwide professional network of journalists who support a socially responsible and moral media to convey accurate content, address the challenges of our time based on the highest principles of ethical journalism, and understanding that universal values are key elements of a world of peace. So this will be a follow-up on our first program talking about Northeast Asian issues with Mr. Doug Bandow, who is the senior fellow at the Cato Institute. It's a policy research organization, a think tank based in Washington, D.C. And he'll be joined later in the program by the international president of the Universal Peace Federation, Dr. Michael Jenkins. So please enjoy this discussion.
We're very happy to have this opportunity every Tuesday, and I would like to thank Doug for this chance, and I think we'll turn it back over. Larry, why don't you join us and guide us through a little bit of discussion. We're looking forward to Doug to be on one of the next Fact Finders too with us, so thank you, everybody. So Larry, if you're not coming back, I'll just go right forward. Doug, why don't you give us some comments on this whole, special audacious initiative of President Moon and the call for complete verifiable denuclearization? How do you see that possibly moving forward? And what's the Biden administration doing on that?
Well, I think the Biden administration is frustrated. It would like to talk with the North. In many ways, I don't think it has anything new to offer beyond kind of the Obama administration perspective. I mean, there's this kind of almost feeling of redoing strategic patience, which is no answer. The problem is the North doesn't just wait. The North builds nuclear weapons and missiles. So you can't just stop. But from a Biden administration standpoint, if North Korea won't talk to the U.S., kind of then what? I think that the Biden administration recognizes there is no military option. We're well past that. That any military option, almost certainly would trigger wider conflict on the Korean Peninsula. It would be a catastrophe. And then on sanctions, they're quite willing to add sanctions, but again, there's no evidence adding at the margin sanctions is going to change North Korean behavior. It hasn't. Sanctions generally don't work well to convince governments to give up what they view as kind of existential interests or vital interests. And the North Koreans clearly have decided, at least the Kim regime, that's a bit different from the North Koreans, of course, but the Kim regime has decided, I think, that nuclear weapons are essential for its survival and very unlikely to give them up. If I had to guess that what the North is doing right now is they saw that even the Trump administration was committed to genuine denuclearization. The North plans on building a bunch more and then presenting the U.S. with here we go, we're willing to give up some of these, but it's going to cost you, in terms of sanctions relief, we're not going to give everything up, but take it or leave it. If you want us to be here with 150 or 200 nukes, we can do that. Or if you give us some relief, maybe we give you 100. That's kind of my guess is the North is planning in the future for really tough negotiation where in essence, the U.S. will be forced to concede that North Korea is effectively a nuclear state. So I think that's kind of, the Biden administration has no obvious way out of that. And the big problem, honestly, for the Biden administration is it's overwhelmed with everything else. A difficult midterm is upcoming. The president is focused on domestic policy. Russia and Ukraine are at war. The U.S. is back in Ukraine. The relationship with China has gone south in a very bad way. From the standpoint of the Biden administration, of oh my, I mean, what's the new crisis? What else do we have to do? I think it's very hard for them to move forward. The South Korea wants to move forward. The audacious initiative makes a lot of sense in a logical way. But again, look at it from North Korean perspective. The North Koreans care less about economic development than the nukes, in part because, look, if you're Kim Jong-un, you live pretty well. I mean, you're not starving. The fact your people are doing badly, frankly, has never been an issue that has mattered an awful lot, as far as we can tell, to the elite, the nomenklatura, the top decision-making element in North Korea. And the focus these days is North Korea is very concerned about outside cultural contamination. It's very interesting. You look at what Kim Jong-un has changed a lot over this. A decade ago, I mean, he brought Dennis Rodman in. At one point, they had a concert, and then Disney figures pranced around the stage, not with Disney's approval, but this clearly was something which Kim Jong-un liked. In 2017, he and the missus co-sponsored a K-pop concert. Today, they're throwing in prison, teenagers who sing K-pop songs. And I think that what the North has realized is the greatest threat to it is not poverty. The greatest threat is North Koreans getting more information. And, they get flash drives, they watch, South Korean movies and soap operas. There are now cell phones. You're not supposed to use those to call outside the North, but there are opportunities to do some of this. I think that the North has gotten very nervous and realized in an information world, it's lost the young. So it's got to try to reestablish very tight controls. And with that, frankly, is going to come, I think, more economic controls, that untrammeled, free markets and the idea of lots of foreign trade and stuff. I think those are probably out for political reasons. So the North, the North dismissed kind of out of hand the South Korean proposal, in part because it shows the North is inferior economically. But I think also because the North it fears, not say that, but I think it fears the contamination, that having a lot of contact with the South, having economic development, having people come in, I mean, all of these things are actually, from a North Korean standpoint, threatened. So unfortunately, it makes it very hard to see how we move forward. Probably makes sense for the US and South Korea to be on the same page to basically allow South Korea to make some potential commitments on sanctions relief. And I would say, the kind where you have snapback, and there are lots of ways you can handle this, but to give South Korea an opportunity to take the lead here. Frankly, these issues matter a lot more to South Korea. They matter because of historical background. They matter because of families that are separated from the war. They matter because they're next to each other. They matter because at some level they're still in an unfinished civil war. All of this matters more to the South than to America. America has a Pacific Ocean in between the US and North Korea. South Koreans don't. So the US really should be moving in a way to try to help South Korea take the lead here, try to find its way forward, have some authority, have an opportunity to tell North Korea, if you play ball with us, we can make certain things happen. And I think that was one of the problems, that was not the case under President Moon. One of the reasons I think Kim Jong-un ended up treating the last administration so badly. So at the moment, I don't see a way forward. And the problem is we can't not do anything, because the North Koreans will not stop building nukes, and they will not stop building missiles. So unless we have a plan to move forward, I think we're going to be in a much worse situation 1, 2, 3 years from now. On the other hand, what to do right now and how to get Washington's attention, given the mess that's around it. And let's face it, if the administration loses, that is, if the Democrats lose Congress, at the very least the House, maybe the Senate too, it's looking more likely they'll hold that, but we don't know. And this could go either way. This is an administration that will be in dreadful political situation, and everything will be open partisan warfare for the next presidential election. This is a very, I think, frankly, a dangerous situation. It worries me a lot.
Great, Joe. Great, Doug. Doug, one question is, how do you see North Korea and their claim that they're going to, or their promise to Russia, they're going to send 100,000 troops to Russia? Are they really prepared to do that? And they're going to send 100,000 workers. to rebuild the cities that Russia takes in Ukraine. Now, that was before Russia was pushed out of Ukraine, so we'll see. But what's your thoughts on that?
Well, try to imagine the movement of 100,000 people anywhere. I mean, this is no easy thing. So the question of how do you, you're going to load everybody up on trains and send them across Russia? Who's going to feed them? Do you have enough? I mean, I think this is kind of bloviating on the part of the North. The North Koreans understandably want to have Russia and China both have its back. From North Korea's standpoint, you have China and Russia behind you. You're protected on sanctions. There won't be more sanctions. You've got political support, and you're going to have an economic lifeline. You figure between them, they'll make sure you have the energy and food you need. So I think this is a North Korean effort to say we're on Russia's side. It's high profile. I could imagine that the North might send civilian construction workers at some point. But let's be very clear. At the moment, Russia's not concerned about rebuilding cities. Russia's concerned about holding the cities that it's taken. It doesn't want to lose any more. And 100,000 North Korean soldiers, are they going to do better than the Russians did? I mean, how do you integrate them? Have these people any training? I just think this sounds to me like it's an expression of support in a fairly dramatic fashion. I would be very surprised if it's a real offer, and I can't believe the Russians are counting on it.
Was there any confirmation that North Korea got oil through this promise, or any other benefits directly, or is that part of the plan?
Well, I haven't seen anything confirming. I mean, this is one of those things you imagine the Russians would not go out of their way to, kind of show that to the world, that they would, they have a fairly short border with North Korea. Presumably, they could send it across that way, or they could work out a deal conceivably with the Chinese to send it through a much longer Chinese-North Korean border. My guess is that if Russia provides oil or other aid, it's going to be modest compared to what's come through China. That I wouldn't expect a lot. On the other hand, who knows? I mean, if the Russians can't sell the oil to anybody else, they might decide that giving a bit more of that to North Korea is a pretty good investment for political support in the future. If they want some of those old Cold War armaments and ammunition that they're kind of running short on, that might be a trade there. But I haven't seen any confirmation that we've seen that.
We have a question from our audience. Roger Weatherall writes, I read an article today about how Apple is moving some of its manufacturing of iPhones to India instead of China. Do you think we are going to see a continued diversification of investments by American companies into other countries? What effect will this have on the geopolitical situation?
I think we have extraordinary pressure arising both in China and the US, and frankly, not just the US, but some allied countries, but mostly the US. People are talking about decoupling. Both sides are very nervous about being too dependent on the other, especially when it comes down to issues of semiconductor chips, of the high value ones. The US under Trump continued under Biden, putting a lot of pressure on China, limiting their access to high quality chips, limiting not only production, but other companies using them. So from a standpoint of an Apple, it makes sense to diversify. They're not going to walk away from their entire investment. But I'll tell you, if you're looking ahead, you see the US and China seemingly on a collision course, not just politically, but economically, even possibly militarily. You probably don't want to have everything tied up in China. And where you know that China might play economic warfare against the US, again, you probably don't want everything tied up there. So I think this is going to be continuing. And on top of that, frankly, is China's no longer a cheap production site. So there's a natural movement of some companies to, especially to Southeast Asia. They're looking for cheaper labor. They're looking for places they can reduce their costs. So if your costs in China are no longer as beneficial as they once were, and you see political problems, it makes sense for you to start moving whatever the US government's saying. Then when the US government is pushing you to start decoupling, I think you're going to see more of this.
Doug, what do you feel would happen if China really does attempt to take over Taiwan, what scenario do you see playing out? And why don't you include in your point you make about helping our audience understand the very unusual situation between China and Taiwan in terms of the fact that Taiwan is considered part of China. It's part of the nation of, quote, China. Go
Well,
ahead.
I wrote a piece for the Quincy Institute and argued, Americans can understand, Taiwan a bit better if they think about the American Civil War. That is, in 1861, the North could have said to the South, go. Erring sisters, go in peace. That we don't like slavery, we don't think you should leave, but frankly, we're not going to kill anybody over this. But the idea of the Union, which is really what the North fought over, they wanted to hold the Union together, mattered hugely. It mattered emotionally. It mattered in terms of nationalism, that people in the North were prepared to fight for that. And in a sense, that's what you got with China. Taiwan was part of China. It was taken in 1895 when Japan defeated China in war. So Japan held it until 1945. Japan lost the war, it went back to China. So it's with the mainland from 1945 to 1949. 1949, Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists are defeated. Mao Zedong declares in Tiananmen Square, October 1st, 1949, People's Republic of China. Chiang Kai-shek flees to Taiwan and essentially transfers the government of the Republic of China to Taiwan. So at that point, the mainland and Taiwan are separated again. And basically through 1980, both claimed to represent all of China. So the PRC said, we are China, ROC said, we are China. Well, the US under Nixon, shifted the formal recognition was under Jimmy Carter, but Nixon in 1972 went to China and reopened up relations and used this as kind of a Cold War move against the Soviets. So the US then ultimately recognized the PRC, has a relationship with Taiwan. The Chinese view this as Taiwan is and always has been Chinese. It was improperly taken by Taiwan. It's part of Taiwan. It's part of China. This is a very deep, very strong nationalistic sentiment. I have found this among students who don't like internet censorship, but oh my goodness, they believe that Taiwan is Chinese. So the point is, again, the fact we don't think they should view Taiwan as being part of China. And frankly, the fact Taiwan certainly doesn't believe that. There is virtually no sentiment in Taiwan today to be ruled from Beijing. And what sane Taiwanese would want to be? Look what happened to Hong Kong. There is no longer a model of two systems, one country. That's gone. There's one political system. It's oppressive, and it's basically fealty to Beijing. The problem is China views this, and the Chinese people, not just the government, view this in a raw nationalistic terms. And we've got to understand that. This is very serious. Now, the Chinese don't want a war. They would much prefer to use coercion to convince basically the Taiwanese to hold a negotiation and give up, one way or another, however you want to kind of, sugarcoat it. I don't think that the Chinese want to invade. Invade, look, it's 100 miles of rough water. Amphibious landings are not easy. They've never done this. They can easily, if the Taiwanese invest well in anti-ship missiles and stuff, this could be very, very difficult for the Chinese. My guess is that China would try other forms of coercion, blockade, take a couple of the islands that frankly are very close to the coast of China. There are other things they might try to put increasing military pressure on. I think an invasion happens if Taiwan declares independence, or if the Chinese really believe the US and Taiwan are conspiring to create an independent Taiwan, then maybe they'd roll the dice and do that. A victory means they get a ravaged, destroyed Taiwan. This is a very poor gamble in my view on their part. If they lose, I think the government falls. Xi Jinping is gone. But I wouldn't assume that they only make one attempt. The US gets involved. There's a very good chance the US would lose. US sends ships there. They're going to get sunk by missiles. The Chinese are likely to have air superiority over Taiwan. The US has never fought a war that way before. Now, the US is very good at this, and the US is working hard to try to combat Chinese techniques. And one of the things the US could do is intercept and basically destroy Chinese naval trade, Chinese, the merchant marine. I mean, but we don't want to go there. I mean, the moment you start thinking about escalation, if the US and China start shooting at one another, other countries are probably going to get drawn in. And what we used to shoot at each other could very well go up in power, or go up in danger. We don't want to go there. I mean, so there are a lot of scenarios, and I think both sides lose the moment it moves to military. Our best bet is to keep it kind of like it is today, ambiguous. Taiwan is autonomous, has its own society, effectively its own country, but doesn't call it that. China is willing to be patient, let this go, convince the Chinese if they really want Taiwan, they actually need to be, be favorable. They need to, have a society that Taiwan wants to join. The US and Taiwan have to be willing to back off a bit of some of the attributes of independence. There's no easy outcome here. I just hope we can all avoid a war. I mean, because everybody will lose from that.
Great. Doug, give us an understanding from your perspective of what Taiwan has that China wants so badly, besides the sovereignty over another population, but there's more to it than that. What is China really after?
Well, economically, Taiwan would be a very nice addition. Taiwan has a higher per capita income than China. And Taiwan, of course, is the site of a mass production of very high quality semiconductor chips. Now, in a war, my assumption is those factories would be blown up. That if Taiwan was losing, Taiwan would wipe them out. Now, you can rebuild, but this would take a long time. I mean, if China wants access to semiconductor chips, trying to take over Taiwan is not a very good way to do it. But the economic benefits presumably would be significant. So if you could get Taiwan voluntarily, peacefully, this would be a major addition to Chinese economic growth. And another aspect, frankly, is security. That is, the US, we see how the US reacted to the Soviet Union putting nuclear weapons in Cuba. Cuba is as close to America as Taiwan is to China. From a Chinese standpoint, to have Taiwan in the orbit of the United States is very bad from a security standpoint. Much prefer to have that controlled by China, Chinese bases there, kind of Chinese naval and air bases there. So I think that China has security and economic reasons for wanting Taiwan. I think that the emotional nationalistic one is probably the strongest driving one at the moment, but those practical ones also are very real. And again, that's why we shouldn't underestimate this. This is not something to go into assuming it'll be easily resolved. Taiwanese, they've made a country, they deserve to live the way they want and in the system they want. The question is, how do we help them preserve that without having everybody jump into the abyss and kind of take down the 21st century along with it?
Doug, we can't thank you enough. Larry, I'd like you to come back for a moment to give final remarks. We really thank you, Doug, and also we thank the Cato Institute too for the fine work it does together with your leadership as a senior fellow.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Larry. Any thoughts on today's program?
This has been another absolutely stellar conversation. Every time we have Doug Bandow on one of our webinars, it's just amazing. I see why he's in big demand, why he speaks at college campuses. And every time I try to get a hold of him on the phone, he's in Kuwait or somewhere giving a speech. Mm-hmm. He's tremendously well informed, very interesting. I loved his assessment of there at the end of the pros and cons of what goes through China's mind when it thinks about Taiwan. It's not just a simple matter. It's and China is a great strategic player. China has infinite patience. They're always reminding us that they're a many thousands-year-old civilization, and they really are. And they think and conduct themselves that way too. And I think Doug is correct in the way he sums up the difficulties of how China deals with Taiwan and why it's better just to it's better for everybody. Just leave it alone for a little while and see what happens. It's been an amazing conversation.
Doug, we really appreciate. We're always sorry that we don't have more time when you're on the program. So we look forward to our next opportunity. and we wish you well. Thank you to our audience. Dan Hess wrote, Mr. Bandow, I love your terrific pro-peace orientation. That's a great way to end the program.
Oh, I thank
are
you
a
so much.
peacemaker. You are a great peacemaker, Doug. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week. We'll be here
Thanks
next
so much.
week with the Washington Brief. Thank you.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that presentation. As you can see, it's a very, very complex situation in Northeast Asia, and always at the front seems to be China and the challenges that they present in that region. But we had some amazing insight from Mr. Bandow. As you can see, he's got just a depth of experience, many years of understanding and working in that area, in that region, as well as some insights from Dr. Jenkins as well. If you enjoy these kind of programs, we have programs, webinars every Tuesday at 2 p.m. You can go through our website, us.upf.org. And on various topics, Northeast Asia, we do a lot, sometimes religious freedom. We've been doing on programs on human trafficking, but some of the other associations of the Universal Peace Federation dealing with academicians, economics, parliamentarians, religious leaders, so a nice variety of topics. So I hope you can join us for one of those. And I had mentioned different principles that we are working with at the Universal Peace Federation, what we call principles of peace, and I just wanted to read those over briefly for you. Number one is we are one human family created by God. Number two is the highest qualities of the human being are spiritual and moral in nature. Number three, the family is the school of love and peace. Number four, living for the sake of others is the way to reconcile the divided human family. And number five, peace comes through cooperation beyond the boundaries of ethnicity, religion, and nationality. So if those resonate with you, please get in touch with us at UPF. Our contact information has been up on the screen. You can call us here locally, or you can check through our website, our national website, us.upf.org. So once again, thank you for joining us today.